everyone, and welcome back to the Hope Within a podcast. I'm Crystal Cedino, the Training and Development Manager for the Native Learning Center. I'm thrilled that all of you are tuning in for another episode this week. With me today, I have my wonderful co-host.
Hi, everybody. I'm Coralie Fanfani, the Training and Development Specialist here at the NLC.
Yes. And today we're going to be talking about energy resilience with Michelle Moore, who is the CEO of Groundswell. So hi, Michelle. Go ahead and tell everyone hello and introduce yourself.
Hi there. It's such a blessing to be with you all today. Thank you so much for having me. I'm the CEO of Groundswell. We're a nonprofit. Our mission is building community power, and we mean that in every sense of the word. Really deeply connecting clean energy to community values, and also connecting the economic value of that clean energy to economic empowerment and community development.
Awesome. I think that's so amazing because we definitely need that in Indian country. Absolutely. All right. Well, so let's go ahead and just jump into, our episode here. Can you tell us a bit more about your work in the field of energy resilience and the work that Groundswell does specifically?
Absolutely, and thank you. Clean energy has so much potential. Shifting from this mentality where our energy is from extracted sources that hurt people, that impoverish them, that make them sick, and that are destroying our climate, to abundant, clean sources of energy, that work within the context of our communities and that sustain and support health and well-being. It's just a really transformative moment. And to be able to go from clean energy to energy that also helps to make our communities more resilient and more independent and more self-sufficient, is a really next level opportunity. And it's one that's very rapidly emerging. From a technology perspective, it's using clean energy like solar panels, paired with battery, with energy storage, on a little microgrid, which is just basically a computerized control system that tells when to use energy and when to store energy, enables us to power ourselves and to truly be much more independent from national or even from regional electricity grids, and at a very basic level to keep the lights on when the power goes off. And Groundswell has been building on the work that we've done in working with community-based organizations to develop community solar projects that are really designed to reduce people's energy bills and to reduce energy burdens, to bringing in energy storage to help make neighborhoods more resilient too. So we're developing projects in Southwest Atlanta, serving Atlanta's HBCUs. We're developing resilience hubs in neighborhoods around the city of Baltimore. And it is just a much more transformative opportunity to use clean power in service to the people that are using that energy.
Awesome. And, I feel like the question here is, or something that definitely needs to be answered is, why is building energy resilience in Native communities so important?
I think building energy resilience in Native communities is a powerful opportunity to own your own power and to operate your own power too. So it's not depending on utilities or public power institutions or others to bring that electricity in, and then your money goes out and you're depending on somebody else's economic balance sheet, cost benefit calculation to determine what's right for your community. It's about being able to generate power locally from abundant natural sources and store it and use it in ways that align with your own priorities. And particularly for tribal communities who haven't had access to power, or who've depended on diesel generators in more remote areas, or who are sort of at the fringes of the grid in rural communities and suffer more from power outages that last longer. It's also an opportunity to bring resilient energy technologies in that are going to consistently keep the lights on. So it's just eliminating that concern and eliminating that vulnerability where you're dependent on outside institutions that don't have a history of putting your priorities first.
How incredible and like empowering would that be to, like, you know what I mean, have your own like utility company. So exactly like you said, so that it all stays within the community, and like you don't have to go anywhere else, and like, I mean, potentially, would you know who's working, you know what I mean, at the utility company and everything?
Absolutely. And I think that for communities that are not in remote areas, that are in smaller towns or even communities in bigger cities, there's the potential for these same technologies to work even at the building level or at the household level, just with rooftop solar, that's connected to a battery that's sort of like an appliance in your home, or appliance in your building. And it has huge cost saving potential over time too, especially with the investments that are now being made in resilient power. And that includes the infrastructure investments, that the federal government will be expanding on very rapidly in the coming months and the next few years as well.
I was thinking as I hear you guys speak, it's not just about the energy, but also how it's like a domino effect on how it'll build the whole community. Because
Yes.
in creating this within your community, you're also creating jobs, and you're creating a whole microeconomy within your community. So it's people that you know, people that you trust, and it's building on generation. So I think that's super powerful. Speaking of these microgrids and speaking of these opportunities, right? You mentioned earlier energy storage, right? Can you explain to us a little bit more what that is, how it works, and how it benefits native rural communities?
Absolutely. So energy storage is just using battery systems that enable you to store the power that's generated from a local solar array, for instance, on your roof or in your neighborhood, so that you can use that energy later rather than having to pull energy from the grid. And just to give you a sense of what that might look like, if you installed a battery storage system in your home, it would be sort of like an appliance. Like imagine something that's maybe half the size of a dishwasher. And that would be about a battery size for your home. Or if you were installing an energy storage system to serve a school, it might be about the size of the air conditioning unit, just for scale. And that battery system paired with local renewable energy has some other important potential benefits too, because you talked about jobs, and economic development opportunities as well. Energy is a necessity of civilization. It's a utility in the sense that everybody must have access to affordable, clean energy. And it has a huge economic impact too, on the jobs front, but certainly on the cost front as well. You talked about rural communities and rural energy burdens. An energy burden is the percentage of total household income that a family spends on electricity, are through the roof. Groundswell just published a report, looking at state level energy burdens. There are 7 states in the United States that have average energy burdens over 20%. And Alaska has an average energy burden over 40%. But it's not exclusive to colder northern states. Mississippi has an average energy burden well over 20%. So being able to capture that value and reinvest in our communities by using what we have abundantly, in the sun, stored locally, so that we can connect power locally, is an incredible opportunity to support healthy economic development that's community driven, and to do it in a way that's also fighting poverty, because that level of energy bill, paying 20, 30, 40%, paying 10% of your entire household income to keep the lights on, that's really impacting your health and well-being and your quality of life, and it holds people back.
No, I completely agree. And I was doing a little bit of research in preparation for this conversation, and I was really enthralled to see your community solar and your resilience hub, and they're mostly in urban settings, right?
Yes.
So how can we bring those type of projects into our native communities?
There are some very specific opportunities, and I would say, Groundswell's resilience work in particular has focused in more urban environments, just because the policy environment has such a big impact on what you can build. And in native communities, there's some very specific avenues that provide even grant funding, to help stand projects up. And I know that the history of some federal agencies has been less than collaborative, to say the least. And that even when agencies are showing up with love and with good intentions, the paperwork can be a beast. But there are opportunities that are emerging that are worth it. So within USDA, particularly for rural communities, there is the REAP, Rural Energy for America program, that will pay for, I believe, 70% of the cost, of new clean energy systems, including battery storage systems. There's a new opportunity that's coming out of the Department of Energy. They have a LEAP program that's about supporting community innovation that was just announced. And there is a Clean Energy Futures Prize that was just announced as well, that's up to $250,000. And the Economic Development Administration, EDA, has specific competitions, including funding that is specifically for Native American communities, that is focused on connecting new technology hubs to economic innovation. And those funding opportunities are in the millions of dollars. And again, I know from, and I should mention, I'm somewhat an unrecovered policy maker. I served in the Obama administration for a time. I know the paperwork is intense, but it is worth going after these dollars to be able to invest deeply in new technologies at this time, because we're just on the cusp of this transformation. And I'm from a small town myself, and rural communities really have the most to gain. As kind of zooming out for just a minute, when we think about our old energy economy, we've always been local communities, right? That our local connections, our local relationships, our families, our extended networks, we make decisions locally about what we want our futures to be like. So our policy decision making, infrastructure, our governance, centers on the local community. Our energy systems have just been so out of sync with how we live and who we are. Our energy systems have been driven by these giant power plants that burn fuel that's been extracted from the ground, from far away, impoverishing the places where those resources are extracted, killing people with fence line toxic exposures, and providing power to faraway places. And P.S., impoverishing people on the user side of the equation too. And it's been very out of sync, with everything else about how we live. And clean distributed resources give us the opportunity to reinvent that equation at this point. But not only that, to really reinvent the values that our energy systems are built on. And that's the transformational moment here. Get that federal money and invest it, to rebuild local energy systems on the values that your communities prioritize, and be relentless. The Biden administration has made a commitment that 40% of the benefits of the administration's historic investments in clean energy will go to disadvantaged communities. And disadvantaged communities is a policy term. I wish they had picked another phrase. It really kind of heaps responsibility on communities instead of, acknowledging the fact that that communities being under-resourced or disinvested is about what people did to them, not what communities did to themselves. But that's the policy language that they're using. But what that means is that there is a commitment that has been made that those federal agencies have a responsibility to communities to invest reparatively and to invest restoratively. And I would encourage anyone to hold regional representatives of federal agencies, national representatives that you work with, fully accountable for realizing that promise.
I love that. We talk so much about, all these opportunities that are fantastic for Indian country, and yeah, they are. But a lot of the time, Indian country is left out, or you know what I mean, like rural, or what did we just underpoverished, or just those communities in general are so like left out of the equation, or like you said, like you placed it on the community, the responsibility. It's like no.
Exactly.
No. Yeah, no, absolutely not. So
exactly, or you make a nice promise,
right.
and then the way the administration works, right? The way that the administrative processes work are exclusionary. What good is it if you make a commitment to invest reparatively in communities, but then you require the community to cough up a 35% match?
Right.
What good is that?
No,
It's not.
none.
It's not.
Yeah.
And so there are opportunities that are rolling out to be helpful. And I would mention specifically, Groundswell is one of the core partners in an initiative that we're calling the Justice 40 Accelerator. And so it's justice40accelerator.org. And there is a process for providing $25,000 initial project pre-development grants to communities. And there is also an open process for anyone who is connected to the accelerator to participate in workshops, briefings, information sessions, where we're trying to bring a more accessible, certainly more accessible than grants.gov, explanation of what some of these federal opportunities are. And our goal is, really rooted in values around reparation and restoration of communities, and in a loving way, really working with love at the center of our commitment. And the near-term outcome we want to see, though, is we want to see communities go get that money. Like, get the money, bring it home. So.
Absolutely. So with talking about money, I mean, we know the DOE, or if you don't know, now you will. The DOE recently announced $12 million in funding for Indigenous communities to create projects, that reduce energy and increase energy security and resilience, which is amazing. And, we're talking about going and getting it, and, doing that little bit of, not little bit, because it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but to do that work, to grab it and take it and put it back into their community. So what are some of the project ideas that could be funded in order to achieve this goal?
So I'll share 4. And I'll share them kind of in order, right? Sometimes energy efficiency is one of the least sexy things in the world, right? It's behind the walls. It's like insulation, weatherization. It's not anything that you see most of the time, but it shows up on the bill. And to your point earlier, it's also a great job generator, local jobs, and helps to sustain contractors, and also helps contractors to build new skills that they can go make additional dollars on, right, with new services. And there are a lot of different ways to do energy efficiency, whether you are independent with your ability to develop your own utility, essentially, or whether you're partnering, for instance, with a rural electric cooperative. There's a program called Pay As You Save, and it essentially uses energy savings to pay for even new air conditioning systems. It can pay for solar panels. It can pay for energy storage systems, so long as there's utility bill savings associated with it. It is a very well-established program. Groundswell is actually leading a rural energy efficiency program in my hometown of LaGrange, Georgia, that's based on that model. It's called SOL, Save on Utilities Long Term. And I would encourage anyone to start with energy efficiency and check out that model. just because it's very scalable, it's very well established, and it's a way to take energy efficiency improvements that can pay for themselves and then take other types of grant funding to be able to really invest in improving housing. You know, when you run into high utility bills that are really associated with something really important about the home that needs to be improved, like a roof issue or a structural issue or an issue with windows that are about health and well-being for the people living in that home over the long term. And I would specifically uplift one of my personal heroes, Mr. Curtis Wynn. Curtis Wynn is the CEO of Roanoke Electric Cooperative in northeastern North Carolina, and he's building the utility of the future there. So go check out what he's doing. Check out what we're doing with LaGrange Soul and energy efficiency. The second thing would be solar. And you can look at community solar, you can look at rooftop solar, depending on what's right for your community, depending on what's right for the way that buildings are organized. Is it denser? You know, is it more rural with more remote locations? And bring solar to the party, and look to these funding opportunities that are coming out from DOE, USDA, and also the Economic Development Administration. To be able to invest deeply and help pay for some of the upfront costs in ways that enable you to also create job training programs around it. I think Native Renewables has great examples of how to pair rooftop solar and energy storage deployment with job training, so that you get more economic development bang for your buck, essentially. You know, the third thing, of course, would be energy storage. Bring resilience to the party. You know, and there are definitely savings benefits there, but there are resilience benefits, there are self-reliance benefits, and then also, you know, there are services that communities can offer to utilities that are valuable. Like utilities get economic benefits from being able to invest in distributed solar and renewables instead of having to build big infrastructure, right? Because it's less expensive to do a solar panel and a battery than it is to run like a whole bunch of new hard infrastructure. So use that leverage, use the value you have to offer to negotiate a better deal with the utility that serves your community too. You've got leverage, like people power, right, is very relevant in this clean energy future that we're building. And then the fourth thing I would think about is electric vehicles. You know, not just electric vehicle charging infrastructure, but there are great examples from rural communities in Northern California around Fresno. Mayor Ray Leon set a great example of using funding that was available from the state of California, you know, investing in pollution reduction and investing in communities to create an EV-based transit service for rural families who had lower household incomes to be able to get more affordable trips to the doctor, you know, to schools, to appointments that were far away, and that reduced the trip cost by more than 50%. So there are so many ways to put these technologies to use, not just for, you know, energy and energy savings, but really to connect to broader needs and priorities for the local communities that they serve.
So I wanted to ask on that last one with the vehicles and the cars. I mean, do you know specifics as far as like how that project ended up working? Because I mean, as we know, like in Indian country, especially, I mean, it's underfunded. They don't
Yes.
have a lot of resources as it is. So, I mean, did they purchase the cars? Did they like, how did that, do you know any specifics?
I do, and there's a great, very detailed case study online about this as well, which I can share, you know, via link later. But in terms of the case study, you know, the Mayor Ray Leon, through a nonprofit that he worked with, went after state of California funding that was specifically focused on investing in communities, in low and moderate income communities, and in communities that had particularly high pollution burdens, that paid for the cost of software, you know, to manage like a rideshare app, and that also helped pay for the cost of new electric vehicles, you know, that was then complemented by sponsorship support from Chevrolet, I believe, who also provided additional new electric vehicles to help people get to vaccine appointments and healthcare appointments specifically related to COVID. And so with that funding support, from available state dollars, from available, corporate sponsorship dollars, they were able to develop a program that hired local drivers, that used EVs that were purchased through the program, and that implemented, a technology-based rideshare system, so people could call a day or so in advance and schedule their trip to the doctor. For the first year, I believe, the trips were free to help establish the service and familiarize people with it, and also to help the people who were serving as drivers, understand what the pace and rhythm would be. And then they gradually introduced fees for the trip, but the fees were less than half of what people would have to pay for informal rideshare services that were just much more expensive because people had to buy gas, and gas is expensive. And thinking about EV rideshare-based services and cutting and pasting, what has worked with Mayor Leon's program, the program that he founded, that opens up opportunities for DOT funding too. So a lot of places to go with it, and particularly for rural communities where people struggle with the economics of. And P.S. owning a car is really expensive, insurance, maintenance, all the things. It really, really, really has been a powerfully helpful example for very rural communities, primarily of farm workers surrounding Fresno.
No, that's amazing. Cause I like in previous conversations around energy and whatnot, like, not smart cars, electrical vehicles and so on and so forth, like they get such a bad rap because, like I've heard it hundreds of times, like, oh, that's not feasible. It's not, but I think that's a really great example, like a fantastic example of how, they were able to create a system to, employ people, first of all, to create the, you know what I mean, like the app, and whatever else, the electronics that were involved with it, and then the vehicles to just the concept of being able to use those vehicles to take you to your appointments or maybe the grocery store, or like, to get those basic needs met. And I think a lot of the time, I know, at least I've, heard this, individuals in Indian country think like that, no, that's not, we can't do that. But it's like, no, we can. And that's how we can make it work. But I think it's so important to hear these projects, because then, you know what I mean? Like, even I was like, well, wait, how is something like that feasible in Indian country? Like, I was like, that's why I was like, I want to hear a little bit more about like what exactly was involved. And that is incredible. Like, I am truthfully blown away. Like, that's really cool.
Crystal, as someone that did the commute, because I used to work on the reservation, so I daily did the commute from the res back and whatnot. I was hearing Michelle talk, and I'm like, oh my God, this would be revolutionary, because whenever I remember some of our community members had to go see specialists outside and go all the way to Broward, and my car, I know, took a toll with the daily back and forth, or if they had to go even like on go to Walmart or something that they need to get outside the rest. I was hearing you talking, I was like, oh my God, that would be awesome to have those type of services. And that leads into a lot of like, if it's community based and whatnot, into that self-determination where our community members are serving themselves. We're supporting each other and whatnot. So I think that's a really cool project. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was like, what? Hearing you talk about it, I was like, that is so cool. That would be, I've traveled throughout Indian country and I know what it's like. And I mean, even just, from our Big Cypress, you know what I mean? Like what Cora was saying, from our Big Cypress reservation all the way to Hollywood, like it's a good, like what, hour and a half, maybe, depending on traffic and all that. Yeah. But like, especially in those like super rural communities where I know everything's like super far, I just think that's so cool. Like, and that goes to show our listeners, you can do it. You can make
Absolutely.
it
And
happen.
I think that, like I said, I've got a heart for rural communities. And when I was, as I've been researching this topic, there's so many powerful examples of just courageous innovation. People going out on the limb, doing something, starting something that nobody believed could work, getting in, figuring it out. But it's in these small places that don't really get seen. They're not visible. And without that visibility, it's hard for anybody to know that it's there to be able to cut and paste, whether it's the inspiration or whether it's the playbook. And there are so many powerful examples out there that show, yeah, you can do it. And get that money, get that money that's been promised, and bring it home and make it happen.
Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions, Crystal.
No, I mean, Michelle, do you have any like favorited projects that you've worked on or anything like that you'd like to share, just to kind of like throw a little bit more out there to Indian country?
Well, I would share this, that Groundswell has been, very blessed to be able to work in urban communities and rural communities across 6 different states so far and counting, plus, a little project we've been nurturing along in Hawaii. And everywhere is a little different, right? Because of place-based considerations, because communities have different values and needs. And if there is any way that what we have experienced, including the lumps and bumps, y'all, because let me tell you, there's some lumps and bumps that come along with innovation, we are happy to share our experiences, happy to share the network of values-aligned partners, because that values alignment is critical. With anyone who wants to try to figure out how to do a clean energy project, a resilience project, a solar project, whatever the case may be, for your community. And I would encourage anyone as well who's interested to tune into the Justice 40 Accelerator. We will be making information available about the Justice 40 related funding opportunities that are coming from the federal government. And we'll be having workshops with federal officials, also former federal officials, who can speak a little bit more openly, because once you're in those seats, everything is like, pre-decisional deliberative and you get a little stiff, but folks who aren't in the seat anymore, they can tell you the tea. So, so tune in, I think that we just really want to be a part of sharing and sharing openly and transparently what works and what's also really hard. So that we can all make use of this moment of tremendous transformation to align our energy systems with our values and get it right, for the next 150 years.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, this was incredible. This is why I love this podcast, because you dive into all these things and it's just so much more, like, I don't know, down to earth, and we're just having a conversation. So, all right, that's it. I'm gonna zip it.
Well, I just really appreciate, both of y'all so much for reaching out and, for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of what we've learned. And if there's, ever anything that we can do to be supportive, holler. And I'm going to be knocking on y'all's door next time I pass through Florida. And y'all do the same if you're through DC or LaGrange. We had an open invitation. And I will also send you those links. And I'll have to Google for that case study. But the rideshare service is called Green Reteros. And it's actually built on kind of a homegrown rideshare solution among the Latino farm working community in Northern California. And so it was really sort of using a local solution and then just bringing clean energy technologies to it to provide more benefits. So a beautiful example, of how the solutions that communities need are already there. It's not about like imposing some external system that also imposes a whole bunch of non-native values.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it's something so beautiful when the work that we're doing correlates and goes hand in hand with the values, and the people that are working on those projects all have the same mentality.
Yes.
It really does allow for these projects and these initiatives to kind of bloom beautifully.
Yeah.
And really take care of everybody that's involved. So thank you so much, Michelle, for taking the time to speak with us today. We know you're a busy, busy woman.
Oh no,
We really
this is
appreciate
great.
it.
This is
Um,
great.
and so that brings us to the end of this episode, guys. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us today. And as always, thank you for listening to the Hope Withinga podcast. If you guys enjoy our show, please rate it and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and also visit our website, www.nativelearningcenter.com, to find more information on upcoming webinars or virtual trainings. And be sure to come back for more content. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.